I never thought I would one day tell my own son, "Get out of my house." But that's exactly what happened. My husband had been gone for just 4 hours. For hours, and I could still smell his scent on the sheets, still hear the sound of his breathing echoing in the silence. It was in that moment, amidst the heaviest grief I have ever experienced, that Tyler showed up. 15 years without a word, no phone call, no hug. And suddenly there he was, standing at my door as if time had the power to erase everything that had happened. At the funeral, our eyes met, and there was no trace of reconciliation in them. It was like every painful memory came rushing back all at once. The hug I had dreamed of receiving for so many years never came. Instead, I felt a weight, a discomfort, as if his presence was a cruel reminder of all the absences. I kept asking myself, why now? Why come back on the one day I was most fragile? And the answer seemed obvious: he hadn't come back for me. When the words, "Get out of my house," left my lips, they didn't come out as a shout but as a boundary. It was as if I had been carrying heavy stones in my chest all those years, and at that moment, I simply had no strength left to bear them. I was already shattered by the loss of my husband, and I couldn't allow another wound to be opened. I didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but deep inside I sensed that this scene was just the beginning of something even more painful. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel Vintage Revenge Stories. We are building a community of incredible women who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. It was late at night, and the restaurant was nearly empty, the silence broken only by the clinking of cutlery and the distant hum of the fryer. I was exhausted, my legs heavy from hours on my feet, when I saw the door open and Tyler walk in. He moved with a look that mixed pride and disdain, as if he were above being there, but at the same time carrying something he refused to admit: need. I knew this encounter wouldn't be simple. There was always tension in the air whenever he showed up unannounced. He sat down across from me and, without beating around the bush, said he needed $3,000 to invest in cryptocurrencies. He spoke with the conviction of someone who truly believed they'd found a golden opportunity, like it was the last chance before becoming a millionaire. But I knew I couldn't help. I was barely keeping up with my bills. While he talked about profits and multiplying money, I thought of my overtime hours, sleepless nights, and sacrifices just to survive. His frustration when he heard my "no" was as visible as a punch on the table. What I didn't know, as I tried to justify my refusal, was that his choice to ask for money wasn't the only wrong thing that night. My emergency fund, money saved up through years of effort, penny by penny, was gone. He had already taken it without me knowing. Maybe that was the mixture of pride and disdain in his eyes. Like he knew that even without my help now, he had already taken more from me than I could imagine. And although I hadn't realized it at the time, something inside me was starting to suspect that something was very wrong. The news didn't hit me like a sudden explosion, but like a cold blade slowly sliding through. When I checked my bank account, the zero balance stared back at me like a black hole sucking all the air around me. Tyler hadn't just taken my emergency fund. He had cleaned it out. Not a single cent was left. And to make matters worse, I found out he had fled the city. The messages I received from him were short and cruel. "It's for your own good." Those words, written by the person who had taken away my ground, sounded like mockery disguised as concern. In his room there was only a crumpled pillow left, and on it, a note. A single sheet, scrawled arrogantly, as if the pain I would feel was insignificant compared to the great vision he believed he had. His handwriting was filled with defiance, almost like one last glance over his shoulder before disappearing. I read and reread those words until they started blurring from the mix of tears and anger. I felt something inside me break again, like an old wound forcibly reopened. The pain that pierced me in that moment was as deep as the pain I felt the day his father left us. It was as if a cycle of abandonment was doomed to repeat itself in my life. And this time there was no room for excuses that might soften the blow. He hadn't taken just the money, he had taken my peace, my trust, and another piece of what held me together inside. I knew this story couldn't end there, and somehow I would have to find him. The feeling of sinking into despair came like a rising tide that wouldn't stop. Without that money, rent became a shadow I could no longer shake off. Every day was a fight to keep the light from going out completely, but reality slammed me against the wall. To avoid losing the roof over my head, I took on a third job. 3 shifts, 3 days of nearly superhuman effort, as if my body were a machine programmed to endure, even when my soul screamed for rest. And my mind. Oh, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts stealing my sleep and peace. This exhaustion I felt went beyond physical tiredness. It was a weight on my chest that tightened every night, a silent shame that kept me from sharing my pain with those I loved. How could I explain to others that my own son, the person who should have stood by my side, had destroyed the little security I had? What hurt the most was the invisible loneliness that accompanied that shame. That period became the darkest time in my life, a hole where it seemed impossible to find any light. But even in the midst of that darkness, I learned that despair cannot be the final chapter of our story. Exhaustion is not a sign of defeat, but of a battle still being fought. It is in this moment that we need to rediscover the strength we often didn't even know we had. And paradoxically, it is born right out of the depths of the abyss. But I realized that this would only be the beginning of a path that would demand even more courage. It was one of those long nights at the restaurant, when exhaustion weighed on my body and my mind began to drift far away. It was in that setting that Vincent appeared. A regular customer, but until then, I had seen him only as just another face in the crowd. He struck up a conversation so naturally, as if he understood that behind my tired smile was a story that needed to be heard. And to my surprise, he never judged me, not even for a second. That was so rare for me that it stirred something deep inside my chest. Vincent was a kind man, the kind who carries a calmness that spreads to those around him. A widower, marked by life's hardships he didn't try to hide, he understood the weight certain losses leave on a person. What struck me most was the way he listened, not like someone hunting for drama or entertainment, but like a friend who truly wanted to understand. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen as a whole person, not just a woman crushed by her problems. That feeling of being truly noticed was almost a balm for my wounded soul. That conversation with Vincent opened a door I didn't even know had been closed for so long. It was as if, at that moment, I could breathe a little easier, feel that life still held good surprises, even when everything seemed lost. And unknowingly, that simple meeting at the restaurant would be the first step toward a transformation I could hardly imagine. But life has its mysteries, and that was just the beginning of something much bigger. As the days went by, Vincent stopped being just that kind customer and became a constant presence in my life. He showed up without warning, bringing small gestures of care that, to someone living through such heavy days, felt like true miracles. Without ever asking for anything in return, he became a safe harbor where I could rest my weary soul. It was amazing how someone who had known so much loss still had so much love to give. His presence slowly taught me that I could be more than the pain I carried. One day, when I least expected it, Vincent looked me in the eyes and said something that seemed impossible. He was in love with me. In that instant, the world seemed to slow down and I could barely believe what I was hearing. For so many years, I had felt invisible, unworthy of true love. But there he was, with all his sincerity, breaking down the walls I had built to protect myself from suffering. It was as if a new chapter of my life was beginning to be written, full of hope and possibilities. Accepting that love was an internal struggle, a battle between the fear of opening up again and the desire to be truly loved. That feeling awakened a doubt I never thought I'd have. Was I, with all my scars and painful stories, really worthy of such love? And in the silence of my thoughts, I realized that maybe the answer lay precisely in allowing life to surprise me. And at that point, I had no idea just how much that decision would change everything forever. I decided to give that unexpected love a chance, even carrying the heavy baggage of so many years of pain and distrust. It wasn't easy to open my heart, but I felt that, beside Vincent, I could find a safe space to rebuild myself. A year later, we got married and I experienced one of the most transformative times of my life. He welcomed me into his home as if that place had always been mine, not just a temporary refuge but a true sanctuary for both my body and soul. It was as if, for the first time in decades, I could truly breathe again. Without the constant pressure of sleepless nights and endless shifts, I began to care for myself with an attention I had never allowed before. Vincent, with his patience and kindness, showed me I didn't have to live in survival mode anymore. The peace of living without working myself to exhaustion was a gift I never thought I deserved. And yet there it was, right before my eyes, inviting me to a new way of being. But starting over didn't mean erasing the past. It meant learning to live with it without letting it control my life. Some days, memories came like shadows, testing my strength and faith in the future. Still, with every act of love and every small step forward, I knew I was building something worthwhile. A life that, despite its scars, allowed me to dream again. And the journey was far from over because there was still so much more to discover. With Vincent by my side, my life opened up to a world I never imagined I would know. We traveled together to places that before only appeared in magazines or my wildest dreams. Every new landscape, every culture discovered, was an opportunity to rediscover myself, to leave behind the walls of the past and embrace the vastness of the present. Those moments of peace and discovery renewed not only my body but, most importantly, my soul, teaching me that happiness can be found even after the fiercest storm. Though I heard nothing more from Tyler, I learned a valuable lesson. I cannot allow people who don't deserve my trust or love to destroy what I have worked so hard to build. The past stayed behind me along with the pains that consumed me. I refused to be a prisoner of the wounds left by those who chose to walk away without looking back. The strength to move forward came from understanding that my worth does not depend on the approval or presence of those who hurt me, but on the love and respect I build daily for myself. Vincent, with his simple and steady way, made me feel special every single day. It wasn't grand gestures or empty words, but small, sincere details reminding me how much I deserve to be loved. He was my partner, my friend, and my greatest supporter, showing me that true happiness is born from the genuine connection between two people who choose each other, even after everything. And through that learning, I realized life has the power to surprise us when we least expect it. When Vincent suffered a stroke, my world turned upside down in a moment frozen in time. I remember the sound of the ambulance, flashing lights, and the overwhelming feeling of helplessness that took over me. Suddenly, the strong, kind man I knew was there, struggling to recognize familiar faces, trying to understand where he was, to recall the present that seemed so simple to us but was a terrifying mystery to him. Each day at his side in the hospital was a silent battle, where love mingled with fear and hope. Watching Vincent gradually worsen was a blow no emotional preparation could soften. The house that once was our refuge turned into a space filled with medical equipment, medicines, and constant care routines. I found myself playing roles I never imagined: nurse, caregiver, confidant, even psychologist. The physical exhaustion was immense, but the heavier weight was in my heart. Seeing the man I loved slowly fade, fighting to regain parts of himself, was like watching a slow, painful sunset, bringing the certainty that our lives would never be the same. Still, I held on to the strength of what we built together. Every small progress he made, however shy, was a victory that kept us standing. And though the future was uncertain and the road hard, I knew that deep love would give me the strength to face whatever came. Life, with its unexpected twists, still had challenges in store that would teach me the true meaning of resilience and care. But only time would reveal that. At the moment I most needed peace, Tyler decided to reappear, like a shadow insisting on returning when least expected. Now he was well-dressed, carrying the air of someone who had conquered the world, but his eyes didn't lie. They held a mix of pride and something I couldn't quite decipher. He spoke of having learned about Vincent's condition, using it as an excuse to justify his return. He said he regretted everything he had done in the past, as if words could erase years of abandonment and betrayal. But deep down I knew it wasn't true. Men like Tyler don't change by chance, and they certainly don't show up out of nowhere without a hidden motive. I wasn't fooled by his rehearsed speech and superficial charm, trying to slip back into my life. In that moment of weakness, when I was caring for the man I loved, Tyler tried to take advantage of my vulnerability. My intuition, the inner voice I'd often ignored, was now screaming that this wasn't a genuine apology but a carefully planned strategy. This return opened a new wound, mixing hope and fear, because even knowing the danger, part of me still wanted to believe he could be different. But my heart had already learned to protect itself, and the courage I needed to say no before would have to grow even stronger. After all, amidst so many challenges, I had to be ready to face not only what life brought but also those who insisted on coming back to mess everything up again. And so the story went on, with twists I never imagined I'd face. After a whole decade without a single sign, Tyler appeared at my door like an unexpected storm. He said he wanted to visit Vincent, who was sick, and in that voice there was a sincerity that almost fooled me. My heart split in two at that moment, torn between the desire to embrace him and the need to send him away. That man who had hurt me so deeply now seemed to be asking for a chance, and I didn't know if I was ready to give up the protection I'd built over the years. Still, I decided to let him in. Maybe it was the exhaustion of fighting alone. Maybe it was that part of me that never stopped wanting to believe in the best. I opened the door and unknowingly was allowing danger inside. Every step he took in my house carried a shadow, a silent sign that things would never be the same. That fragile trust one was still trying to nurture began to be tested, and doubt returned to flood my thoughts. In that reunion, I felt the weight of the past and the threat of the present blend in an unsettling way. The house that had once been my refuge was about to become the stage of an internal and external battle I never imagined facing again. And even in that frightening scenario, I knew I had to hold on to the strength that had brought me this far, because what was coming would demand all my courage and wisdom. In the days following the reunion, Tyler changed the script I knew so well. He became attentive, present, as if wanting to make up for all the years of absence in just a few moments. He helped with Vincent's daily care, researched treatments, and asked questions that showed genuine interest, or at least it seemed so. Slowly, a thread of hope began to form inside me, making me believe he might really have changed. It was hard to deny this new side, so different from the shadow I kept in my memory. But even with those gestures, there was an inner voice refusing to be silenced. It was as if my heart carried a kind of silent alarm, a red light flashing to keep me alert. Experience had taught me not to ignore these signs, because the past had already shown me that what appears isn't always what it really is. I started paying attention to small details, hesitations in his gaze, words that didn't quite fit, trying to understand if that change was sincere or just a well-rehearsed mask. That mixture of hope and distrust made the following days a real emotional battlefield. On one hand, I wanted to believe Tyler could be part of our life again, but on the other, I had to protect the most precious thing I had, my family and my peace. And that tension only grew, creating an uncomfortable expectation about what he really wanted there, and what lay behind that apparent change. The future, as always, seemed uncertain and full of traps. That silent night, while Vincent fought for the last time, I felt the world slow down almost to a stop. I was beside him, holding his hand with all the strength I could still gather, when he whispered words that pierced my soul. "Don't trust." But before he could finish, exhaustion seemed to overcome him and silence took the place of words. In that moment, a chill ran through my body, as if an invisible shadow had descended on me, leaving a silent warning I couldn't ignore. Soon after, Tyler appeared, trying to calm my restless heart. He said Vincent wanted to comfort me, that those words weren't meant for me, and that I needed to focus on the strength Vincent still had left to give us. I wanted to believe those words. I wanted to cling to any hope that would keep me steady. But inside, a part of me knew something was wrong. That whisper wasn't a mistake but a genuine warning left for me amid the hardest farewell I've ever experienced. That doubt settled like a stone in my chest, a mix of love and fear that would stay with me in the days to come. Even amidst the pain of loss, I felt an urgent need to uncover what lay behind that incomplete warning. The story seemed to gain a new layer of mystery, and I knew that to protect everything Vincent and I had built, I would need to be more vigilant than ever before. And so, the plot deepened, pulling me toward a challenge greater than I could have imagined. On the day of the funeral, while tears and sorrow filled the room, Tyler seemed like the perfect son. He was present in every detail, helping with whatever was needed, carrying himself with such respect that for the first time in many years, I felt a shy pride stir inside me. It was as if, for a moment, the painful past had been left behind, and a new chapter was beginning to be written before my eyes. The charm he won among family and friends created a comforting illusion, a hope I didn't want to lose. But that feeling of pride didn't last long. One phone call was enough to crack the mask. In the funeral home's quiet hallway, Tyler answered the phone, and in that instant his gaze changed. It turned cold, calculating, distant. That image of a devoted son dissolved like smoke, revealing a person I barely recognized, someone hiding intentions very different from what he showed to everyone around. It was a moment that made me realize that truth always finds a way to come out, even when we try to drown it in appearances. That revelation made me rethink everything I had believed about him that morning. The pride I felt mingled with the pain of realizing I might never have truly known my own son. And as the ceremony went on, I understood that day would not only be a goodbye to Vincent but the beginning of a battle to uncover who Tyler really was. A battle that would demand all my strength and wisdom. And that fight, I knew, was far from over. I reached a point where I could no longer pretend everything was okay. I confronted Tyler, looking into his eyes and demanding answers to the mystery that consumed me. It was then that he revealed his true intention. He wanted Vincent's inheritance, claiming rights as a stepson. That moment cut deep because for years I had tried to believe in his change, in the return that seemed full of hope. But there stood the bare, harsh truth. No masks, no excuses. Tyler already had a lawyer. He was prepared to fight for everything he could get, and the coldness in his voice showed this was not just about money, but about power and control. He positioned himself as someone who had it all planned out, and that made me realize that from the start his return had nothing to do with love or remorse. It was a calculated move, a strategic play to take advantage of the vulnerable situation I was in. The feeling of betrayal was so intense it felt like my heart was breaking all over again. But despite the pain, a flame of strength began to burn inside me. I knew I couldn't let myself be manipulated, that I had to protect Vincent's legacy and the peace we had built. The battle ahead was much bigger than a simple legal dispute. It was a fight for my dignity, for the memory of the man I loved, and for the security of my family. At that moment, I understood I faced a challenge that would require everything I had to give. The day of the will reading arrived like a storm about to break. I was there, heart tight, surrounded by curious, anxious eyes. Frank, the trusted lawyer Vincent had chosen, opened the envelope with steady hands, as if he knew how important that moment was for me. As he began to read, my hands trembled, my throat dried, waiting for something that might bring justice or at least some relief. Then Frank revealed a document Vincent had written before his death, a letter full of all his pain and wisdom. In his words, my husband made it clear that Tyler was not welcome to inherit anything. He described my son as a predator, someone who used manipulation and betrayal to exploit our family. That document didn't just deny Tyler any rights. It sent a strong, final message, like Vincent's last act of protection for me and what we had built together. It was such a deep shock, it felt like the ground was opening beneath my feet. The truth was exposed clearly and irrevocably, and I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief knowing Vincent had protected me even after death, and sadness for the pain he had to carry to make that decision. In that moment, I realized the battle was far from over, but I had a strength beside me much greater than I imagined. The love and justice Vincent left behind. And what would come after that, I still didn't know. When Frank took a recording from his pocket, my heart was already racing, but I couldn't imagine what was coming next. The words from that phone were a brutal blow to my soul. Tyler, my own son, coldly spoke about waiting for Vincent to die, so he could claim the legal rights he wanted. Hearing that from him without shame or remorse was like a knife stabbing straight into my chest. A pain so deep it left a void that seemed impossible to fill. That recording not only confirmed all my suspicions but also revealed the coldness and manipulation he was willing to use to reach his goals. It was as if the son I once knew had vanished before my eyes, revealing a stranger who used words as weapons. The feeling of betrayal was immense, but at the same time that proof gave me new strength. A conviction that I couldn't let him destroy everything Vincent and I had built with so much love and struggle. Even in the midst of pain, I understood that this was the moment to stand up, not only for justice but for dignity and respect. The legal battle ahead wasn't just about material possessions, but about honoring Vincent's memory and preserving my own integrity. It was a decisive moment where I had to be stronger than ever because the war was far from over, and I knew I still had much more to face than I ever expected. When Frank revealed Vincent's final decision, I felt a mix of relief and justice that words could hardly describe. Vincent had anticipated everything, even the possibility of Tyler contesting the will. That's why he included a clear and unshakable clause. If my son tried any trick to claim the estate, which totaled $16 million, it would all go to a scholarship foundation. It was as if Vincent had dealt one last masterstroke against injustice, ensuring his legacy would not fall into the wrong hands. I could feel Tyler's fury even from afar, but I also knew he was defeated. This was a battle he could not win, not because I had more money or lawyers but because truth and justice were on my side. Vincent's decision didn't just protect our family, it turned this painful story into something greater. A legacy that would help others achieve opportunities they might never have had. And that filled my heart with pride and hope, showing me that even in the greatest hardships, good can prevail. In that moment, I understood that the cycle of pain and betrayal was finally coming to a close, but also preparing me for a new chapter where I could rebuild my life with the certainty that I was protected and stronger. The fight had been hard, but the victory was mine. and for everyone who believes that love and justice always find a way. And this victory, I knew, was only the beginning of an even greater transformation. There came a time when I had to look Tyler in the eyes and say something that had weighed on my heart for a long time. My real son died the day he chose money over love. It wasn't just a harsh phrase. It was the realization of a truth that had consumed me since he turned his back on me and everything that truly matters. That boy I raised, full of dreams and hope, ceased to exist when his actions showed that the deepest bond, love, meant nothing to him. In that moment, I realized the connection that once united us had been irreparably broken. Tyler was still there with his familiar face, but to me he was just a stranger carrying my history, not my heart. That painful separation was my way of protecting myself and everything I still wanted to build, far from the shadow of betrayal he represented. It was a silent but definitive goodbye that made room for me to move forward with the dignity I deserve. That decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. It freed me from the burden of waiting for something that would never exist again. And even though the wound was still open, I knew I was taking an essential step toward healing and building a life where true love would be the foundation. The past was behind me, and now it was time to look to the future with renewed courage and hope. And that journey, despite everything, was only just beginning. 6 months after all the storm I had lived through, I had the honor of attending the first scholarship awards Vincent had dreamed of. Being there, surrounded by those young people full of hope and the desire to succeed, was like looking into a mirror of the past. It was as if I could see our own dreams reflected in them, the doubts we once faced, and the strength that pushed us forward. Every smile, every bright gaze carried the promise of a better future, and I felt deeply touched to be part of that transformation. As I handed out those scholarships, I felt a unique mix of pride and gratitude. The pain I had carried for years, the betrayal, the loss, the struggle, was transforming into something bigger than my own suffering. It was a living legacy that would help others reach opportunities they might never have had. That showed me that even in the hardest situations, it's possible to find a greater purpose, something that gives meaning to everything we go through. And there, before those lives full of potential, I realized I was finally writing a new chapter of my story. A chapter where pain turns into hope, where the past is no longer a burden but the foundation for building something new and meaningful. It was the beginning of a life guided by a renewed purpose, to transform our pain into opportunity for others, and so continue the legacy of love and justice that Vincent left for me and the world. Since that battle ended, I never heard from Tyler again. I learned he tried to contest the will, but faced with the firmness and justice Vincent left as his legacy, he gave up. His absence, though painful, brought a peace I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I could finally breathe without the weight of betrayal and the constant fight to protect what is mine, by right and by love. Today my life is filled with the memories of the man I loved, Vincent. Those memories are like a beacon that lights my days, guiding me to move forward with courage and gratitude. Every gesture of his, every word of encouragement and affection, still lives inside me, strengthening me to face whatever challenges may come. The certainty that I protected the legacy we built together is a pride no obstacle can take away from me. Living without Tyler was a painful but necessary choice to preserve my sanity and well-being. I learned that true blood ties are not just biological, they are built on respect, love, and dignity. And it is in this truth that I found my freedom and strength to keep writing my story, now far from the shadows of the past and closer to the light that guides me today. Throughout this journey, I learned something that changed forever the way I see love and life. True love imposes no conditions and does not accept exchanging pain. I discovered that inner peace is a precious treasure that must be protected from those who try to use it as a weapon against us. This lesson came from open wounds, betrayals, and losses, but also from the choices I made to protect myself and move forward, even when everything seemed to fall apart. I understood that the best revenge isn't in confrontations or retaliation, but in living so fully that the absence of those who hurt us becomes an unexpected blessing. It's about rebuilding your life with dignity, self-love, and serenity, showing that we are greater than the pains we face. This silent victory speaks louder than any angry words because it shows true strength, one born from overcoming and growing. Today, when I think about everything I've been through, I see that every hard step led me here. A place of balance where I can love without fear, protect my peace without guilt, and open space for what really matters. This lesson, which came at a high cost, is now a beacon for my life and for anyone going through similar moments. It's an invitation for each of us to grow stronger, respect ourselves, and break free. Because the love worth having is the kind that lifts us up, never the one that brings us down. If you like this story, please share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your perspective. And if this story made you reflect, like the video and subscribe to the channel to follow other real and intense stories like this one. Because in the end, every story is a chance to see life through new eyes.